Hello, and welcome to the Foster Together Network Tech TAY National Summit. On behalf of the Foster Together Network and the Center for Strategic Partnerships, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Raquel Wilson, the leader of this initiative, and the Tech TAY Leadership Board, which has driven this project from start to finish. We'd love to start out with a thank you to our funder, the Hilton Foundation, as well as to Fostering Media Connection. If everybody could make sure you're on mute, thank you. As well as to Fostering Media Connections Youth Voices Rising, who's helping us with the technology and the promotion of today's event. And of course, thank you to our Tech TAY Leadership Board that has worked really hard and infused so much wisdom into this project. As many of you know, this project started with an inquiry into how we could better use technology to support transition-age youth. How do we make sure they have adequate access to the resources they need, and what role could technology play in supporting the relationships that they have? At the same time, what was most exciting that came out of this event was the way in which we approached it with co-leadership. And that's really due to Raquel and the board members. We started out knowing that we wanted somebody with lived experience to lead this team. And we knew we wanted others involved with lived experience, but when Raquel came on board, she really encouraged us to go deeper with the co-leadership and make sure this was a space that allowed our former foster youth to flourish and bring forward their professional skills and even potentially build new ones. So in line with that philosophy, what we'd like to do is start out with a video that was produced by Raquel and two of our board members. And we'll start there and then move towards some panels, small groups, and then joint discussion altogether.
Perfect. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Could you both please introduce yourself and let us know your position with the board?
Sure, I can go first, Gillette, if that's okay. So my name is Antonica Alman, and I currently live in Albany, Louisiana. It's a small town. It's about 10 to 15 minutes away from the city of Hammond, if anybody's familiar with Louisiana. And I am one of the lived experience engagement specialists with the Center for States. I'm involved in several different things, which will take a while to share right now. But on the board for Tech TAY, I served as one of the leads for the focus group called Transition-Aged Youth, Resources and Supportive Technology, which I have thoroughly enjoyed.
Thank you for the introduction, Antonica. My name is Jolette Arrington. I currently live in Los Angeles, California. I was born and raised here. And throughout this experience, I sat on the positive relationships for pregnant women for TAY and Tech.
Thank you both so much for sharing your background with us. And so can you both share what were some of your key takeaways that you found interesting while being a part of this project?
Great. I can jump in if that's okay. I just think some of what I've learned was just to open my eyes more and then see things from other people's perspective. I think since a world of COVID, we have transitions a lot of transitions through technology, computer, laptops, and I just think it's important to support those like individuals. Like, how can we have those personal connections throughout the phone, through FaceTime, online, through Zoom, and how can we provide better resources for our children, for our community, and how can we learn from our mistakes to really help each other? And I think it's important to learn things not from your perspective, but from other people's perspective, because I think sometimes when you're just in your own shoes, you don't know what someone else is going through and how that can affect them. But also learning people's, like on the board, there are mothers that are single mothers and they're going through certain things, and I just think it's important to understand, like, how can I support them when things don't always revolve around your shoes, but other people's shoes, and how we can really support them throughout those like issues and give them the resources they need. Because I think in life, it is so important to have opportunity and resources and to utilize all those tools that are given to us.
Wonderful response. And what I would like to add is that one of the key takeaways for me was hearing that there was actually a lack of resources to accessible technologies and other modalities really across the country. A lot of us a part of Tech and TAY come from different areas. So just to hear that there is this huge lack for transition-aged youth transitioning into adulthood that might not have phones, that might not have laptops, or even access to stable Wi-Fi. It really brings to my eyes how some of these issues that are really tied to the lack of technology could have been avoided had they been provided to them. And so being a part of this work and being part of this council and getting to hear from peers about those other concerns about young people not having access to technology and how that can hurt them in the long run towards the future, how much of a difference that would have been made had they had access to it. I think it's wonderful that us as a council can come together to really brainstorm other resources, partners, collaborations that could help enhance our knowledge or improved access for transition-aged youth to gain access to technology.
Yes, thank you both. Those are great responses, great responses. And so while doing this work, we developed a leadership approach. And so you guys explored, what you found interesting, what is some advice that you can offer to persons who serve or work with TAY on better ways that they can use technology to leverage opportunities and resources for TAY?
Gillette, you don't mind me going first since you answered. Okay. For me, one piece of advice would be to come together to brainstorm where in the areas there is a lack for accessible technology, whether that's from a financial standpoint, whether that's not there's some, but there's not enough to really be able to disperse for all transition-aged youth. And also another would be maybe looking into your policies. I know that some states are revising their policies that are tied to child welfare that might have to do with young people gaining access to technology. And so I always think it's important to revisit those policies that have been put in place to think about ways that we can amend them, that way transition-aged youth across the board can have access to accessible technology and determining what type of technology that might be available. If those options aren't, then I would also probably advise maybe coming together to brainstorm ways of creating funds, generating those funds that can be dispersed to transition-aged youth, so that way they will be able to gain access to the technologies that they need.
I 100% agree. I think for me personally, what I would advise people to do is be open-minded and research, because I just think there's a lot of research that needs to be done, and not everyone is going to have the same experience. Like the experience that one person might not have, the other person might not have. So I think it's important to research and come together and see where there is a gap and how to fill that gap, and where there's lacking, or what is working and what is not working. So I think it is you have to be very patient, and it is a learning experience. But I just think it's something where if I foster you for experiencing the same problem, then that should be the area of focus, and really figuring out how to find a solution. So I think it's just more so really, it could vary state by state. Like California might have a problem versus another state might have a different problem. So I think it's being very tailored to the state and to the people and then the resources that are in that state.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I so appreciate you guys offering some advice to people in the audience, because I think that hearing it from you both first, especially you both have a lived experience, and also having an important hand into this project, you got to see both sides of the spectrum, which makes a huge difference. And so thank you both for answering that question. And so my last question to you guys is, what can programs do, or how can people do a better job with welcoming those with lived experience into spaces, to help youth build their skill sets, be compensated efficiently, whether that be to add value to the project? How can programs or people do a better job with welcoming those with lived experiences into those spaces?
Well, I can answer. Oh, Gillette, did you want to go?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I just think more so utilizing those experiences, letting those experiences be known. I think sometimes it's a lack of awareness. Like, is it being posted on social media? Are you going to local universities and picking that out there? Is it at a job board? Is there a website? Like, there's, I think, multiple things to do, but I think sometimes the biggest thing of it is not knowing that accessible to all. Like, how can we create that accessibility all over the world, and how to really tailor that? But I think there's multiple avenues to do that. So in middle schools, high schools, local career fairs, maybe there might be a table booth that people can attend to know, like, hey, they do care about you. They want to help your growth and who you are in your career and your personal life, and really like help people excel.
Beautiful answer. And I would just like to add a couple of more things to that. Please bear with me. And so some of the things I thought about was that could help programs do a better job of welcoming those with lived experience into the spaces to build their skill assets and to help bring value to their projects. I thought about maybe encouraging more engagement opportunities for young people with lived experience to come and collaborate and to be able to continue to utilize youth voices and be at the forefront of the table. And so some of those potential opportunities I brainstormed could be maybe inviting them to come and maybe facilitate or co-facilitate an event that is youth driven, that can include folks with lived experience for engagement. There are other ways that they could do, probably creating those open spaces for discussions to allow young people with lived experience to be able to feel comfortable enough to share those issues, to be able to come together for conflict resolution. If they're in the workplace with you or in the programs or organizations, creating a space to where folks with lived experience can step away and debrief in case there are those moments where trigger activation might occur. Those things might happen with folks with lived experience, especially depending on their experience being in child welfare. Trigger activation might occur. So making sure that you have that space offered to them when it's available. Equitable compensation. I cannot emphasize that enough. You know, we all like to get paid, especially with the work that we do, you know, so it's important to making sure we are compensating young people for their time. It shows that we value the work that they bring to the table and that we honor and value them as human beings alone. So it's important to think about that equitable compensation, and opportunities for professional growth and development is very important. You know, we want our young people to succeed in life, especially transition-aged youth, because they are transitioning into adulthood. So we want to make sure we are providing them those opportunities to be able to elevate in their careers, to be able to grow into the professionals, and making sure we are giving them the tools to do so. And so this all can help encourage that youth and adult partnership, you know, those opportunities for growth, and it will encourage young people, more young people, to want to engage and want to be a part of your awesome organization and programs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thank you both so much for participating in the segment. We wanted to make sure that even though you guys could not be here today to participate but in spirit, that you guys still were able to offer your key takeaways and your impressions of the board and what you got from it. And just so thank you both so much. Is there anything that you both would like to add? Any final thoughts, any last minute advice or suggestions that you have or that you want folks to walk away from today?
Yes, I just have a small thing to add. Thank you all for joining and attending the summit. You get to hear wonderful knowledge from our awesome council. They're all very hardworking people who have come to this event, who wanted to share this information with you so that we can brainstorm those resources to help our transition-aged youth gain access to accessible technology. So thank you all for joining us. It has been a pleasure, Raquel. Thank you for having me. I have really appreciated this time.
Thank you so much, Antonica. Jolette, any last thoughts, any final thoughts or last words?
No, I think Antonica covered it all. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to the work we're going to do in the future.
Likewise, you both have a great day, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so thank you so much, you guys, for being here today. As Rochelle said, my name is Raquel Wilson. I am the proud project consultant that, facilitated and put this project together and, help bring together a group of highly empowered transitional age youth that have experienced the foster care system, juvenile justice system, homeless system, range of different, things and traumas. But we were able to come together and use our lived experience to, create something very unique and talk about, ways that technology can be used to leverage opportunities for transitional age youth. how how technology can be used also to help cultivate and maintain positive relationships between transitional age youth and their siblings, their foster parents, their mentors, etc. And we wanted to dedicate a specific component and look at an underrepresented group, in which was the pregnant and parenting TAY, and just research how technology can be used to help leverage opportunities for them as well. And in the process, we created this youth leadership approach that we're going to talk more about today, which I'm very, very happy to share. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my wonderful board members who all came together on this project and really help drive and create the force for what. And really with this project, it really is centered around, what can happen when you put those with lived experiences in positions and give them the skills and provide them with the development opportunities and opportunities for them to get job enrichment, skills and grow. Not only could it bring value to them, but that it can bring value to the project. And so without further ado, I want to welcome Keedy Bradley, who is our president, onto the board to introduce herself. And then Keedy is going to pass it over to Louie, and then Louie is going to pass it over to Trisha. And then we're just going to keep going until we have the entire board introduced.
Hey everybody. So you guys hear my voice for one and then y'all see my face on another. So I'm just letting y'all know that. But hi everybody. My name is Kiana Bradley, but those who I've connected with and the board who knows me personally, I let them and allow them to call me Keedy. So I'm the president of Tech TAY, as we serve to make sure all youth have access to technology and better ways we can support them however we can, and making sure that's seen nationwide throughout all states. So I've been able to just make sure I'm representing the council at meetings or events, and leading our communication with best practices and best recommendations, and just helping making sure our Tech TAY focus groups leads have been able to make sure we're making the best practices and best recommendations for all youth who've been needing and who've been wanting technology for a long time now, and putting in best practices that could be able to help support them and utilize resources. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Vice President, Louie.
Thanks, Keedy, and great introduction. My name is Louie Gasper. I currently live in Washington, D.C., and I am on the board as the vice president of the Tech TAY board, and it has been an honor to work with these folks and do a series of different things, which you'll get to hear about later, from focus groups, survey development, and really just thinking about, how can we try to make the most sustainable impact possible to help support transition-aged youth in having access to technology and being able to also use it in ways that are most affected and helpful for them. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and I'll pass it to you, Tristan.
Thank you, Louie. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My name is Tristan Ganji. I'm the secretary on the Tech TAY Leadership Board, in charge of keeping track of notes and keeping track of making sure all the information's in one spot for everyone to easily assess. Outside of the board, I work at New Alternatives for Children as a transitional-aged youth coach and liaison, helping a handful of young individuals ages 21 to 25 navigate the post-foster care experience, finding housing, education, jobs, day-to-day stress. I love being a part of this board and working with similar and like-minded individuals, and hopefully using the policies and the experiences of our collective past in order to shape and hopefully create a better, more sustainable future for other foster youth and former foster youth to come. With that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Sabrina.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Sabrina Abong. I use the she, her pronoun series, and I am one of the members of the TAY and Tech board. What I've enjoyed from TAY and Tech board is helping out parents that need resources, because I am a former foster and I am a mother myself. So I was really thankful for Raquel to let me be a part of this. What I do outside of work, I am also an advocate for foster youth, and my main job is I work for Tesla and I help create mega packs. Thank you for having me today. And I will pass it to Parker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Parker. My pronouns are Z, zers. I'm the communications person. I really have enjoyed my time on the board. Some things that I do outside of the board, I'm an advocate, I'm a teacher, and I'm also a social media influencer connecting young people to different resources. So I'm definitely really connected to our mission, and I look forward to talking to you all more. And I'll pass it back to Raquel.
Yes, thank you guys so much for the wonderful introduction. So with that being said, we are going to be doing a panel, and then we will follow up with small breakout groups to talk more about the three components, the three components that we worked on, and then the youth leadership approach as well. And so I would like to welcome Louis, who is going to be speaking more about our resources for transitional-aged youth component. Sabrina to the forefront, who's going to be talking more about our pregnant and parenting TAY component, and then Tristan, who's going to be talking about our cultivating a positive relationship in TAY, so that we can just have a more unique conversation about their experiences and impressions with the board and the project and what they got out of it, and some key takeaways that they would like for you guys to gain today. And so with that being said, welcome Tristan, Louis, and Sabrina. Again, I want to thank you guys so much for being a part of this. You guys know that I set this interview up sort of like an interview, but I just really want to have a unique conversation about, your impressions and some of the things that you took away from the board. So my first question that I would like to ask you guys is, what were the key things that struck you regarding the project? And so I'll pass it over to Louis first. And so Louis, what were some of the key things that struck you about this project? And that can be from when we first got started until today.
Thank you, Raquel. I appreciate this question a lot because I've been reflecting a lot on this project as of recently. So some of the things that stuck out that I think was really, for one, being able to match a lot of the foster youth advocacy that we bring in other areas with an important topical area focus, in this case, technology, in order to really move that forward. So being able to advocate, but also really having that scope in mind allowed us to figure out, what are the more concrete impacts that we wanted to make as far as, recommendation building and building a report and all of that. I think that it was also notable how we were involved throughout the way in identifying not only the strategies of how to engage youth, but also doing brainstorming alongside professionals. So, for example, we were able to bring in somebody from LinkedIn who works as an engineer, as well as someone who worked with Amazon Web Services. And we're able to have discussions around things like CWIS and SACWIS systems, the child welfare information systems that are represented in important considerations of things like data quality and things. So I think we had a lot of discussions that were specific to what are the recommendations needed in order to move forward tech and TAY access to resources, as well as pregnant and parenting resources and cultivating positive relationships. But we also really got to explore with the partners from the department and agency as well. Another thing that really stuck out about this project, I think, was some of the results. So we developed a final report with Raquel's lead, and we're able to put together some of the pieces of what did we learn from the focus groups and the surveys, including things like what youth interpreted as tech and TAY, what TAY interpreted as their biggest risks for using technology, such as experiencing racism or sexism or cyberbullying, as well as other things. So being able to have a deeper understanding of what those real issues and experiences I think was helpful for us when we were trying to figure out what are those concrete needs, because we were able to look back at that data that we had ultimately collected and helped guide the process for as well. And I think another thing that stuck out was just really the team building along the way. The fact that we were able to learn about each other, support each other, and really having roles where we respected each other, also wanted to grow our skills, and also figure out the areas where we could dig in our feet on day one based off of the skills that we did have, knowing that this would be time limited, but that we wanted the impact to be sustainable far beyond, a year or 2 years. So those are a few things that has stuck out for me regarding this project.
Yes, thank you so much, Louis. I appreciate you, especially mentioning the resource list. With you guys we're gonna share with you guys after this in your follow-up email, and it'll also be available to you on the website. So thank you so much, Louis, for mentioning that. That same question over to Tristan, and then Sabrina, please feel free to follow up right after Tristan. What were some of the key things that struck you regarding the project?
Hi, thank you, Raquel. There was a few things that struck out to me regarding this project. The first being how there are so many resources and information out there that, as a former foster youth, wasn't even shared to me, or things that are out there that maybe other former foster youth weren't shared as well. As well as that, regardless of state or situation, there's so many similarities across the board for foster youth experiences from within the system. Somewhat of a collective trauma of sorts that doesn't just go away when aging out, but yet some adults or workers or people might assume that a foster youth's problems are no longer relevant once they age out of the system, as if, when someone turns 18 or 19, they always have their family to fall back on, whereas the foster youth might not always have their agency to fall back on. I'm also living through an age range where, when I was younger, like say 21 to 25, these resources and the expansion of services for this age group didn't exist. So to see it now being a need and me constantly reaching a new aging out of services resource, it just shows how much these areas are life changing. Help finding a first apartment, or help finding a job, help finding, means of knowing how to have assistance filling out FAFSA or other resources for education. Technology can also help kickstart advocacy or having this population find a voice through article writing, podcasts, self-publishing. This population is very silenced due to maybe being brought up, being told their voice didn't matter, or being told to keep quiet for whatever reason, given their situation. And technology can be a way to undo that, or have them realize, what I experienced matters to me, people around them, as well as the future generations of foster youth. In hindsight, I would love to see a foster care agency ran only by former foster youth and see if they would face the same issues that established agencies are going through, or if their approach would be different and be able to connect on a deeper level. With that being said, I'll pass it over to Sabrina to see her thoughts.
Thank you, Tristan, for sharing, and thank you, Lulia, as well. So for me, it was there was a couple things that stood out for me. So like I said, I am a former foster and I am a mother. So there's a lot of things that technology could help parenting. For example, you can get like a OGBYN, you're going to depression, you're going to postpartum. So there's just different resources that are available that we can help our foster community. Or let's just say like, we have like immigrant parents, they got detained. So there's still FaceTime where you can still talk with your child even though you're detained. We can have like different resource parents connect with the child as well, just whatever they may need. If you need a support group, or their social worker can reach out, be like, hey, look, there's different support groups here available. There's a stipend available for you. You're eligible for diapers. Let's get you connected. There's a community. You're not alone. How can we better make you a better mother or a better father for the well-being of your child? So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Tristan and Sabrina, for answering the question. I love, Tristan, that and us being facilitators of a foster care agency, because I definitely guaranteed that it would definitely be a different structure, and a totally reconstruction of the way that we grew up and how our group home settings were. So I appreciate you for saying that, and appreciate you too, Sabrina, because you speaking about your experiences also as a mom too as well, and some of the needs that you felt like was, that some of the things that you felt like that you could have benefited benefited from, you know, if you had resources, how, how you could have had a better connection to, different folks and, even your siblings, etc. With technology. I think that, mentioning that really provides some hindsight to some of the things and the research that we discovered, while putting this project together. And so Sabrina, I want to pass it back to you to kick us off for the second question. And so what were some of your biggest takeaways related to any of the three components we explored? And specifically, you can talk about yours, but, during this project, and that can be related to the youth leadership approach, any of the other three components, your specific component, what was some of the biggest takeaways that you saw or challenges that you saw?
One of the biggest takeaways that I saw is that there is a really lack of miscommunication, even though we have technology. So I was trying to figure out like how we can have a better form of communication. So if parenting Tay are feeling alone, how can they feel connected? How can they feel like, hey, I am not alone? There's a whole community. How can I better serve my child? How can I be a better parent? Because then again, we don't want to be a statistic like our parents, or like, sorry if I'm triggering anyone. We want to do the very best for our child. So how can we make better sense that we are better parents? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, perfect. And then so, Louis, how would you respond to that question? What were some of the biggest takeaways or challenges that you saw related to your specific component or any of the three components, including the leadership approach?
Thank you, Raquel, and thanks, Sabrina. There are a few takeaways that I think were really important for me. One of them was, in the collecting data, that question around, what is the biggest, like, what are the potential biggest risks of, using technology based on, based on their experiences. Luckily, we didn't have over 50% for anything, but between 20 and 50% people, recognize that, potentially sexual harassment, catfishing, confidentiality and breaches, and as well as experiencing cyberbullying were all potential like high risk things that could potentially happen, and that it's important not necessarily to limit or restrict access, but rather have those conversations in the positions that you're in. If you're a caseworker, if you're a foster or resource parent, to be able to make sure that you are passing on information to help inform that conversation around, what does, safety look like without, limiting access. Another thing we realized, how many, as Tristan said earlier, how many resources really are out there. So there are resources, depending on your federal and state, income rates. And, if you all to qualify for those, then, there are ways to be able to apply for things like free Wi-Fi and cell phones. But there's also things like iFoster, where you can directly request cell phones, or similarly programs that are hosted under internet providers to provide free internet for people, depending if you qualify. So there are a lot of different avenues that I think that nobody would just automatically know. So it's like, really important that we all have a culture of being able to inform each other and centralize this information and empower our communities to be able to have it. So that was something that stuck out to me as well. That I took away. I think also just being able to think about mobile applications and, the world that we live in and how important it is to be able to, know the ones that you can use for certain things like couponing or staying up with the news, and especially things like financial literacy, which, we're not necessarily taught in school, but is stressed so important, once we leave. So being able to really just understand the landscape of it, and that there are these really like high level macro goals of like, I know people like want to create an app as far as, what does it look like to have the entire case plan within it, but also being able to understand, what are the things that, maybe just really good resources that people can use today, that exist out there. And maybe it just needs a little bit of reimagining and re-envisioning, what does that look like for foster youth to use that in addition for their support. And I think lastly, as far as some of the key things is, there are policies that exist I think that there need to be a lot more. But one thing that I would recommend to people is, understand if your state or jurisdiction has a foster youth bill of rights. And this is probably just going to my more general beliefs that there should be one for every jurisdiction. But a lot of them cite in there, certain pieces of technology, for example, like what should it look like to be able to have access for visits for siblings or things like that. But then also a lot of them say things like it's important to facilitate enrichment and extracurricular activities and support that by any means. So, in my mind, especially with the world that we live in today, I think that definitely includes technology. When you talk about education or extracurriculars, that all includes technology access, in relation to what are the services that you can be and the things that you can be a part of. So I think it's important to understand the rights that you do have, and then also speak with those people, from your caseworker, from your attorney, even to the ombudsman, the state ombudsman's office, if you need to make a report, but doing it so you can understand and actually have people who can also help advocate for those rights, whether they're explicit or implicit, to move forward your access. And if you don't, and if you're in a state where you're just starting to advocate for a foster youth bill of rights, or it hasn't happened yet, and there are those kind of efforts, to be able to also hopefully explicitly put technology into it. So I think that there are a variety of things that people could do. I think that there are important practices as well, like what are the advocacy practices, what are the sort of partnership practices that you can facilitate, so a youth can meet the right person in order to get that laptop, in order to get that sort of access. But policy wise, it's important to understand, I think, the landscape that you work within and ultimately how that can be crafted so you can have more access to technology.
Yes, thank you so much, Louis. I really, really, really appreciate you for speaking about policies, dropping the plug on some of those great resources like iFoster that help provide devices and phones to youth and transitional age youth. And one of the problems is that a lot of people just don't know about the resources, and that's the shared information isn't really shared. And so I appreciate you for speaking about that. And so I want to pass that same question over to Tristan, and then we have one more question before we conclude this segment. And just so thank you all, Sabrina and Louis and Tristan again. And so Tristan, what are some of your biggest takeaways or some of the challenges that you discovered, whether it be with the components or the youth leadership approach, which we're going to talk more about on the next question, that you would like to share with the audience more?
Yes. Thank you, Louis and Sabrina, for sharing your responses. My answer is more on the humanitarian sector of our components. For me, it was always how one entity or person can really make all the difference in a person's life. Whether it be, just one person who never gave up on that individual, or their ties to their social worker or agency. And that might be because, in my professional self, I'm still working with former foster youth day in and day out. And, I've had one individual who was so tied to their previous social worker, they didn't feel it was necessary to share their story with another person, or, develop that relationship with another person, just because they were tired of constantly having to revisit their story and hope that they're sharing it with someone who can be trusted and form another positive bond. As well as, some people have even compared their experiences with, my agency specifically, as if, grieving the loss of a family member, because, once they age out, yes, we're always here to help, but we can't offer the same resources or the same extension of care sometimes, due to the fact that they've aged out or are no longer part of the system. And to many people, that's, I find that to be troubling, because, an outsider can't tell that this person that they're working with is a foster youth or a former foster youth, whereas, they're looking to maybe have their social worker help with housing, or, have the social worker play that family type role, whereas not a lot of people are going to care that this person has this unfortunate experience, or they're part of the foster care system. And it can cause a kind of disconnect of like how a former foster youth is being viewed, because some people are just not going to care about their experience. We all have that ability to be that person to help by showing compassion or looking past the behavior for a cause. Each individual I have the privilege of getting to know has that one person that's made all the difference. And I kind of wonder where the youth are without that one person. And if the agency they're working with doesn't have that person to step in, it could be very detrimental to the rest of that person's life. Since you can't tell what a person's gone through or what a former foster youth looks like, we could all be that person. And I guess my key takeaway is just that, a little kindness goes a long way. And it doesn't cost us anything to, provide an open ear or, provide kindness or help, even in a situation where, we don't have to help, but we want to. And, developing these situations, because when time goes tough for that former foster youth or when they're reflecting on their experience, those are the people, whether it be a teacher, a social worker, a parental, a foster parent, those are the people that are making a lifelong impact that when that former foster youth is now in a position of mentoring, they're going to relate back and think, what did I get from X, Y, and Z, or what did they teach me? And we really have such a strong power of influence to further help those navigate the former foster youth system and the rest of their lives.
Yes, and I'm so excited too to have you, Tristan. Just because I know that you are so passionate about transitional age youth, and even in your work, things came up, and so I just really appreciate you, and I absolutely love you guys' responses. And so my last question to all three of you guys is in regards to the youth leadership approach and how you were welcomed into this project. How was it different from other projects that you have participated in? And I'll start it off with Tristan.
Thank you. When invited to this project, I felt very valued for the unfortunate experiences that have helped shelf me into an expert in regards to how a person sees a foster youth or a foster youth as a person, because while we do hold pride in coming from a system that primarily has a lot of negative results and being success stories, it is still an unfortunate experience. We shouldn't have had to experience these hardships in order to be put on a pedestal in order to help others. Remembering what I was lacking throughout my journey in the system in order to advocate and fill in those gaps, among the array of transitional age youth with various backgrounds, being a white male, my experience is definitely different from a person of color or a female. And, I can never, fully imagine what those types of demographic individuals went through. But knowing myself and being the typical less likely to experience problems based on gender and background, still facing issues in the foster care system. So it just shows that, to an outsider of the foster care system, you don't know what a person's gone through. You can't tell someone's a foster youth by looking at them, and to just really, like I said, I felt valued for my experience. And within this group, we all have our own stories. And I'm sure, we could all be sharing, oh, you went through that. I can one up you with this, or, I've seen this in my story. And it also shows to every other former foster youth, whether you were in the system in New York or California, there's a similar tie of situations or lack there of help or lack there of XYZ that we could be feeling connected with or less alone, because a lot of former foster youth, they don't know what's being experienced in other agencies or by other former foster youth. They only know their experience. So hearing others' experience and being on a board primarily of all former foster youth, it really helps strengthen the aspects of not feeling alone and the aspects that it wasn't just my personal struggle. We're all struggling as a collective.
Yeah, I agree, Tristan. And one thing that you talked about was channeling our experiences. And I think that was something that we were definitely able to do. And in thinking about the data collected, we really started the surveys of thinking, what were our experiences that were had? What are the experiences that we want to know that other people had? And, are there themes of how this experience could be better as far as using and having technology access, and also being able to work with the important people in our lives in order to really be able to maximize it. So we really have started with thinking of our own experiences down to, if we had our experiences being cyberbullied or, with things like racism, sexism, etc. And that's not always easy. And it's not always easy to think of that from the perspective of when you were in foster care as well. But I think it's important because our lived experience is not just like one big big block of lived experience, but it's all the different separate things that we dealt with throughout our time in care that make up who we are, how we shape the ways that we see things, and really being able to break that down in this sense from, a technology lens, and then also through like specific lived experiences was really helpful, I think, in both thinking about the qualitative and quantitative data that we needed, but also being able to really help frame the ways that we wanted to look at the solutions. And then I think, as far as the overall youth leadership approach, one of the things that worked really well is that we had, a task at hand, a goal. We wanted to do surveys, we wanted to do focus groups, and we wanted to, get to the point where we could have a report. But other than that, it was really led by the board, I think, in understanding, what were those critical tasks and activities in order to get there. So I think, you're all like, when you give that payoff or when you have that trust, and you're able to build that with people with lived experience, and then able to do the work, and let them really guide it, I think that just adds dividends along the way, and also passion for us. So with that, I'm excited to see, Sabrina, what you have as far as your takeaways.
So I think this Tay and Tech project board was amazing. I've never really been anything a part of this, so it felt great. It felt great to collaborate together as a whole to find available resources for our Tay and Tech people, because there's so much things that we can do through technology. It really made me feel valued, and I'm an actual stakeholder. Like I said, I'm gonna keep repeating. I am a former foster, and I'm a mother, and I love my son completely. So I am very thankful for being here in this space. And I was able to share my experience with similar people like Louie and Tristan, Raquel, and then I was always welcome. They're like, okay, like, what do you think, Sabrina? Like, what else can we bring? So I was very, like I said, I was very thankful for this board. I don't know what else to say.
Well, I appreciate all three of you guys and the board in its entirety, but I want to thank you, Tristan, Louie, and Sabrina, for participating in this interview segment with me. I believe that all three of you guys have provided, the audience with unique experience and unique advice about how they can welcome us into their workspaces as being foster youth, those with lived experiences, how we can add value to the project. I appreciate you guys talking about some of the resources and the key takeaways that you guys, discovered along the way. So at this time, I would like to welcome our board president, Kitty, to have a conversation with myself, about the project, pros and cons, and the youth leadership approach that ultimately came about. And so, Kitty.
Thanks, Raquel. And I guess going into questions with you as of right now. So, Raquel, just questions about what were some of the benefits you identified while putting this project together as our lovely project consultant?
Well, thank you so much. And so, with me, and the benefits, one, I ultimately just like to say that I think that, Rochelle from the beginning realizing and recognizing that, having the intention and wanting to put someone that had lived experience to lead this from the start was like an ultimate game changer. And then I remember that when I got the ask and we got the deliverables and what needed to be done, it was like, we got to get some researchers and hire some researchers. And I'm like, well, why do we need researchers? We are the experiment, and we are the experience and the experiment, and who would know better about what transitional age youth need, and the lack of resources and the lack of affordability and the lack of connection, and even the for the connections, than us. And so I really just appreciated that, that intention and that passion around really cultivating this project around people who actually had the experience, not just professionally, but actually had lived this, because we understood both sides of the spectrum. One of the things that I loved about this project, well, I didn't necessarily love, but one of the things that came up for me that was very interesting is, a lot of foster youth were put in the system. A majority of foster youth were put in the system because their parents were either incarcerated or due to immigration. We discovered that a lot of youth who wanted to build relationships and have connections with, former foster parents, even their siblings, would have appreciated having some type of form of, video conference, technology type of connection where they can be able to text them. I know now that they have created a space in prison where you can be able to talk to your loved ones for free now using like iPads and stuff. But it would be really, really good to have that type of experience and see the need for that and how valuable it can be for youth, especially those who are in juvenile detention centers, as in group homes. Like myself, I was placed in a group home because there wasn't any foster homes. It wasn't like I did anything behaviorally bad. It was just literally because there wasn't any group homes. And then I kind of got shuffled into that, juvenile delinquent space. And so I really appreciate and felt like that was something that we could take away from that, even with the pregnant and parenting TAY, group, the specific group that we wanted to focus on. We also discovered that there's other underrepresented groups that also need that support: disability, the LGBTQT community, mental health, and what mental health could do if we use technology to connect resources and opportunities, transitional age youth, and what that could look like. And so, not just looking at technology from a browser spectrum, but also realizing that, it can be used as a way to connect people and keep people connected and help them maintain relationships and connect them to resources. And then lastly, I think that one of the things that, and I've been talking about this a lot, when we ask a question in our interviews with different transitional age youth, in our interviews with like the Lincoln, we had an interview with the lovely LaShonda Diggs from DPSS, that provided us a lot of information. A lot of folks really didn't know whose responsibility it ultimately relied on, fell on for, who was responsible for connecting transitional age youth, to opportunities using technology or just opportunities and resources in general. Even with our survey results, we had, foster parents that said that they felt like the responsibility was on the social worker, and social workers who were saying that the responsibility was on the youth. And ultimately, I think that, and I always say this, is that there's a table, and then there's separate conversations that's being had. But if we all came together and we equally started, putting our passions together on the table and start really having conversations about what is needed and sharing the information, right? Actually sharing the information, sharing the resources. I think that we can, kind of seal the gap or close the gap a little bit, eliminate some of the experiences that especially some of these transitional age youth are still experiencing. Even 2008 is when I emancipated from the system, and then there's still youth coming out of the system now that are experiencing things that I was experiencing back then, and that's just very unfortunate. So really, it tells me that we've shuffled out social workers, we shuffled out transitional age youth, we sent them to the probation officers, we hired new social workers, we hired new program assistants and program supervisors. The problem really relies in the construction of the system as this whole, and how people actually see us, as foster youth, and so, and transitional age youth. And so thank you so much, Kitty. So Kitty, you also had, discovered some benefits and some takeaways from this project as well. So I would like to give you the opportunity to also share, a few benefits that you discovered while being a part of this project.
Yeah, I would just try to say the one big one for me, like you said, LaShonda Diggs from DPSS from LA County, she did share, like, we need to really start approaching situations and not waiting until youth are like in a crisis management situation. Like, if we already know they're in high school students, like, what do they need? Of course, they want support. They want support and they want to be able to talk to family members and reach out to them. Why would not we give them access to phones or give them cell phones to be able to have those conversations, whether it's with their lawyer, their attorney, their CASA or GAL? We want to make sure that they have the resources to be able to do so, so they can still be a part of their case plan, right? Or their youth transition plan. And then I guess the other thing that LaShonda Diggs, like, she made sure to highlight was that if we catch them early on, it's like, well, then we also give them a laptop because we know that they need it for high school. We know that they're going to need that for college, whether it's an iPad or a laptop, really. We know that they need these things. So not just waiting for a COVID pandemic to happen when we already knew they had a divide in technology access beforehand. So not just waiting for a crisis and then when our numbers increase, or when the quantitative data is like increasing more and more. Like, let's make sure we're addressing the situation and addressing what the youth need beforehand. But thank you.
Yes, Kitty, thank you so much. So we develop a youth leadership approach, right, which I've kind of discussed a little bit. Were there any benefits or barriers that you identify that you want to provide the audience with some advice on? And in addition to that, I would like for you to give, a specific, word of advice to ways that people can adopt this youth leadership approach and welcome those with lived experience into the workspaces to essentially make their projects better.
Yeah, so with my lived experience and professional experience, like you said, so it's like a combination of both. Me being a former foster youth down here in the state of Louisiana, and as of right now, I also get to be the president of our state youth advisory board. So I'm really happy to be able to do that. But I think for a youth leadership approach, we really do have to understand that TAY works in the child welfare systems or the juvenile justice systems. Like, they have huge hearts, and we need to make sure we're supporting them in every possible way that they can. Can you just imagine a continual healing working in a system where you probably felt you wasn't supported, you were re-abused, you were neglected, and you're going back to that system in order to help other youths that are in need. So young adult knows all this, so they're taking a dedicated amount of time to solve all those barriers, whether it's access to technology around educational attainment, access on filling out, maybe like job listings or job programs or housing vouchers. So for housing stability, food security, and mental and physical and spiritual health too as well. So I just want to say, for any TAY that's on this call and the whole board in itself for Tech and TAY, I applaud you all for still working in this type of system. And I would just say, throughout my time, not always feeling valued or felt like just felt like I just wasn't appreciated for all the work and stuff that I've been able to do throughout this time with my lived experience, as well as with my professional experience. I've been able to gain knowledge on what has not really been, favorable, and the barriers to youth leadership. So sometimes those barriers, it could be youth not being compensated for the work and dedicated time on projects. This shows up as TAY starting to disengage due to not feeling valued. Also, you may hear about those TAY whose families are low income and they need the financial and technical assistance to keep their steady continual work on projects. A barrier can also be around a youth leadership approach if they're not feeling like they have a supportive environment where youth can gain skills to grow or having time to discuss time management, because maybe they're having an issue usually with that. So many times they're usually having to go to court, or they're usually trying to have to juggle to make sure we want to make sure we are supporting those spaces and making sure virtual spaces for meetings like Zoom, Skype, Google Meet, and etc. Different uses of computer software as well, making sure that they understand those things. So, sometimes they just may not be feeling safe, or sometimes they feel like their confidential information can be used against them, or not being in a space that supports young adults who need physical or mental accommodations too as well. So I think those have been the barriers, but if we can make sure that those barriers are covered or not, and wouldn't show up in the workplace, I think they'll have, youth can feel more supported, and we can have more of a great leadership approach in all states. But I'm glad that wasn't my experience with Foster Together Network and meeting Raquel. It's been amazing. So my thoughts on pros and highlights of youth leadership, it would be an approach where young adults are given credit on the work they were able to research, create, and publish, ensuring open lines of communication and being able to own accountability, developing team collaborative meetings and networks that support abused or neglected TAY, allowing youth to utilize their creativity and put their talents to use, and letting youth and letting those young adults, making sure that they are utilizing their creativity. We're implementing the work, and we're showing them that in the laws and policies that promote best practices, and that we already have in place, or we could create those and put them in place. Attending training sessions that help deepen the collaboration with TAY, and best practices that help support them to success. And lastly, I guess I would just say, showing TAY you are committed, you acknowledge having a youth voice invited into the round table every time, not just sometimes, but every time. And throughout TAY transitioning throughout care, they would understand that they're being heard and being valued as a partner, which creates a healthy foundation in general and all. And I will turn it back right over to you, Raquel.
Yes, thank you so much, Katie. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you providing some needed advice to our audience members on, the pros and cons that you identified, and just a way for us to be transparent, but also a way for you to speak as the president, right? About some of the things that you saw and takeaways that you saw in your portion of the. So we appreciate you so much for participating in this part of the segment. And so, without further ado, we are going to get ready to do our breakout groups. And essentially, you guys, this is a way for us to engage you all and to have a more in-depth conversation about some of the key that we discovered that came about, which you will find in the final report and on our website. And just to have a conversation, be about 15 minutes. No, nothing too big, but we really just want to make sure that we have have time to split up everyone to have more in-depth conversation, and then when we return, we'll share some of the results that came from the conversation, and we will go into our Mentimeter, and then Rochelle's going to close us out. So we want to just thank you guys for being patient with us, and being a part of this conversation. It's a lot of information, but a lot of valuable information that you guys can take with you into your workspace, into your projects. And so with that being said, we're going to get ready to break off into our breakout groups. And so we'll be floating around. Well, I'll try to float around and see how everyone is doing. And then when we return, we'll have our facilitators present some of the notes that we're taking by our note takers back to the full group. All right, you guys, see you soon.
Everybody should be able to see the options. If you have any issues seeing the options to join, then feel free to mention it in the chat so we can try to help you.
Okay.
Welcome back, everyone.
Yes, welcome back. Thank you so much. I hope you guys had some really, really wonderful conversations while you were in your breakout group regarding the three components. I wish that we could have had more time to speak more. Like, I feel like we was just getting ready to get started. But just thank you guys so much. So very much. So at this time, I want to I want to welcome Rochelle back to the forefront so that she can close us out. But we also want to provide some, needed knowledge and recommendations, and put some stuff in the chat. So I'm going to be asking 2 questions in the chat. And I wanted to get some responses from you guys, to see what you guys think. And we're going to read off the responses, and then Rochelle's going to close us out. So Rochelle just put the first question in the chat, and it reads, what are some of the things you can take away from the tech project or youth leadership approach that you can use to enhance your work style? And so please feel free. We probably could take like maybe one 2-minute 2-minute responses, but then we would like for everyone else to write their response in the chat, and I'll read some of them off. Okay, so is there anyone that wanted to start us off? What are some things that you can take away from the tech project or youth leadership approach that you can use to enhance your work style?
I feel comfortable sharing what my group mentioned in regards to this question, or loosely tied it to. We focus most of our chat upon, how we can use TAY's lived experience in regards to helping the agency also work with younger youth. For example, maybe having a TAY person be a part of a caseload where, that youth individual has someone who's lived those years or lived what that person's going through to also offer experience in case maybe they're not connecting with their social worker or other people that are involved in the case, similar to like a big brother, little brother situation where, that TAY may be able to know how to ask questions or pick up on, certain situations that hit home a little bit too familiarly, whereas maybe that individual might not feel comfortable asking for that help out of a social worker, or maybe the age gap between social worker and client, that social worker might not know about what's going on in the new hip tech world, or what they're using nowadays, where the TAY might know what to watch out for, or know what that youth is using to further help them find resources or get out of maybe negative situations that were found through those resources. But across the board, it was a lot of positive responses to having a TAY play part while giving back to their agency and gaining, those mentorship experiences, learning how to speak to a youth, as well as, honing in on their experience to provide a better experience for the next generation.
Thank you so much, Tristan. I think that was hit the nail right on the coffin. And Parker also wrote, it's important for those with lived experiences to be a part of the development of the programs and the policies, which I definitely agree. I don't think that this project could have done could have been as valuable as it was if we didn't welcome this phenomenal board to the forefront to not only learn skills, but also provide their advice and suggestions and do interviews and etc. So I think that everything worked out perfectly. And so Parker, please unmute yourself. And then I'm also, while Parker's doing her response, I'm going to be writing the last question in the chat for you guys to feel free to respond to as well.
Yeah, our small but mighty team was great. Specifically, I think I had Terry, and who else did I have? Elizabeth in there. And specifically, we're talking about, what are some of the trainings that we could use in order to teach young people how to safely use technology, right, in order to best cultivate those relationships. We talked a little bit about like how to navigate red tape, right? When utilizing certain technology to ensure access to those lifelong connections are happening more streamlined, and different ways to do that. And some of the things that were like brought up, was, potentially bringing in young people to support with that, making sure that leadership are in the rooms and the important people that can make these difficult decisions in order to remove some of that red tape. I know I didn't say it as eloquently as Terry did, but we also spoke a little bit about, going blank now, young people, desires to use more of like technology in ways to enhance that and to ensure that they are using it properly. But I wanted to hand it off to Terry and Elizabeth if y'all have anything to add on to what I said or what we talked about in our groups.
We also mentioned to even, incorporating it directly into like a subject in the schools, or having the social workers, create a group that will provide that training specifically towards all of the TAY youth on their caseload, so that that's something that, they all touch and they all see. And it's mandated that social worker is able to produce that for them.
Yes, thank you, Terry. I just want to open up. Elizabeth, did you have anything? If not, no worries.
Right. No, we were talking about how, setting up trainings for the youth, starting from the social worker, caseworker, the parents, just with trainings with them to get them started on that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'll hand it back to Raquel.
Yes, thank you so much. I love that. And so I put the second question in the chat. And when you guys are considering this question, we talked about in our group, what technology and support with persons with disability can look like. Another underrepresented group, what families that have or parents that have mental health issues, and what that could look like, being able to stay connected to your parents that are incarcerated, or your siblings that were adopted out, and what that could look like. So when you guys are considering the second question, and underrepresented groups, what other underrepresented groups in your sphere could you see us potentially building a project or centering a project component around? Well, I'm just going to assume that I mentioned some really good ones with the mental health and the medical, LGBTQT plus community is also a great one, and utilizing resources to help them, and help them stay connected to their family members and their mentorship. How technology can even play along with, mentorship and how that could be utilized, I think is something also that's important, and we can possibly add some value to it. And so without further ado, I just kind of want to thank you guys so much for being here today and participating in the small groups and participating in our Mentimeter questions. And so I want to pass it over to Rochelle so that she can talk to you about our next steps, some of the things that you can look forward to as it relates to the Tech and TAY board, because we don't plan to go nowhere. So just thank you guys so much. Rochelle, back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Raquel. And I would just love it if people could give a virtual round of applause to our TAY leadership board, our Tech and TAY leadership board. They were phenomenal. You all were phenomenal. Your facilitation, your preparation, and the research that you did to hone this event and plan this event. So thank you. Also, really want to thank the Hilton Foundation. Again, we mentioned it at the top of this webinar, but want to thank them for their financial support to underwrite the project. Want to thank Fostering Media Connections and Youth Voices Rising for helping get the word out and get the tech in place. The next step that we'd love to see is passing the baton to all of you as audience members to implement the recommendations that you've heard today, to really think about what can you do from where you sit in your sphere to ensure that the right technology is in place to support youth positive relationships, to support their access to resources, as a lot of people mentioned, to support safety online as they go online, and to support youth leadership, and think about where are other projects that you might be able to partner more thoughtfully with youth. Some of you are funders. Love to have you think about it as you're looking at projects that you're evaluating. Some of you are social workers. Love to have you think about it for your caseload, or think about bringing this to your team and sharing it with your colleagues or to the leadership of your organization. Some of you are leaders within governmental entities. So again, Terry mentioned some policy things. Pat put some things in the chat that I think could be looked at on a policy level of how do we think through making sure that the support is there. So we'd like to pass the baton to you to take action based on today. As Raquel mentioned, we're going to send out a follow-up that will have an evaluation. We also put the link to the evaluation in the chat. Please let us know how we did. We'd love to continue to hone and improve. So we'd love your feedback. We're also going to send out the actual recommendations related to technology and related to youth leadership, as well as the resource toolkit that the board developed that really talks about what are some of the resources out there that youth and social workers can benefit from. So you'll be getting all that in email. We'd really invite you and appreciate you thinking about how can you take it and put it into implementation and share with others. So any last questions or comments from anyone else? All right, well, thank you all. Again, we just really appreciate you taking this thoughtfully and putting it into action. Thanks to everybody involved in planning.
Thank you guys for being here with us today. We appreciate you.